Hello and welcome to everybody watching from the Manchester Pride Conference for this very, very exciting panel all about mental health. And joining me, I have NHS Accountability Officer, a proud nurse, a professor of nursing, no less, on the board of Survivors Manchester, and a general all-round LGBT plus hero is Craig Harris.
Thank you.
And also, she doesn't need any introduction. Star of RuPaul's Drag Race, but I'm going to give it to her anyway. Star of RuPaul's Drag Race UK, drag artist, mental health nurse, musician, and focal point of my absolute loving envy because she has so many amazing looks. It's Cherry Valentine.
Hello. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I think I'm the only one of us today who's not from a nursing background, although my mother is a mental health nurse, so I'm going to claim some form of connection there. Do you know what I mean?
We can deal with that.
Yeah. So I want to ask, first of all, each of you to talk a little bit about yourself. So I thought I'd throw over to Craig and just ask you, what do you do, Craig? And tell us a little bit how it connects into people's mental health.
Yeah, thank you, Cheddar. And you do look gorgeous today. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I was thinking back before I joined the conversation about how long I've really been involved in mental health. And actually, it's my 25th year this year of actively doing or participating in all things mental health. So I started my nursing career in 1997 as a student nurse, and I've had quite a varied career in lots of things mental health. So I was mental health nurse and I moved into perinatal nursing. So that's mental health and maternity. And then I moved into forensics and dealt with children and adolescent services. And then I became the head of mental health in Manchester for a while. And I've done a variety of different things, but now I'm a chief accountable officer in the NHS. So I have responsibility for all of Wigan, and we call it Wigwam Bam because it is the Great Republic of Wigan. And but I still take a really dedicated focus on mental health, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So I say mental health is the weather of life. And, you know, it can often be surprising, sometimes devastating. And my little boy actually has a diagnosable mental health issue. He's got ADHD. He's 10. Well, he's not little anymore. He's 10, almost as big as me. So I've sort of dealt with that for almost the last decade. But prior to that, my very close friend, Graham, committed suicide a while ago. And it was a really sort of monumental moment, not just the fact that we'd lost Graham to suicide, but more after being a mental health nurse for so long and after reading people, and I pride myself on being able to be empathic and in touch with people's emotions. I just did not see it coming. So it was a real shock to the system that somebody so close to me who was suffering in silence just, you know, passed away. So that's one of my driving forces. And in the last couple of years, my nan's been diagnosed with dementia. So there's a whole range of a combination of different sort of, I suppose, life drivers that that really make me and enforce why I want to do more for mental health and mental well-being. And as I've progressed through the years, it's been something that has never really left me. So I try and do it in all of my different roles. So just as a very quick example, because then I'll hand over to the gorgeous Cherry Valentine. But we have a salon in Wigan. My other half runs the salon, and we're actually doing something called salon psychiatry. So we're training all of our stylists and therapists to become mental health first aid trainers, so they can deal with people in the salon, especially post-pandemic, to support people's mental health and well-being. I'm a presiding justice, which sounds very grand, but I'm a magistrate in the courts. And about 10 years ago, I introduced mental health court diversion. So anybody who came into court that we felt had a mental health issue can be diverted to a mental health nurse in the court rather than just going through the criminal justice system. And that was recognised by Lord Bradley at the time in his review, and something that was rolled out nationally. And obviously, Survivors Manchester, something very dear and close to my heart, is the most amazing charity on the planet. And I am very fortunate and humbled to be a part of something so great. And our support for survivors, male survivors of abuse, obviously has a mental health component, and it's something I, champion in everything we do. So, yeah, it's more now in my DNA, I think, mental health and well-being and the promotion and sort of support for mental health. And actually, I want it to almost be a part of everybody's everyday life. And although we can support it separately, I think if you don't touch mental health or someone in your family or friends or loved ones throughout your life, you're very, very, very lucky, because I think it affects us all. And anything I can do, even if it's just to put a smile on one person's face during a day to make them feel better in themselves, then that's a win for me. So as you can see, I'm really passionate about it. And I've sort of left the NHS bit out because actually I think we need to do better in the NHS for people's mental health. And I try and do everything I can for my staff and how I commission services and how we provide services. And it's just never enough. So I do think, that's one of the areas that, it's the most prominent in my roles, but actually the one where I feel we need to do more for just everybody, really. So that's my little intro into mental health and well-being.
Well, you have given me so much to go into to think about questions, so I won't go into those now. I'll just give you one little quick question, which is obviously you're a professor of nursing.
I am, yes.
Which means at some point you've been a doctor of nursing.
Well, actually, no, because you can be like sort of ordained as a professor if you're a visiting professor without having to do your PhD. So I did a slightly short circuit to professorism or being a professor. And I often thought, do I need to do a bit more, further education? And I've decided, I've done enough now. I don't want to be going back to school.
Right, you wouldn't want that, because you then would be a doctor of nursing, and that would just get too confusing.
No.
So I'm going to throw over now to the lovely Cherry Valentine.
Well, I guess my journey into the whole mental health world was very, very organic. Growing up, I didn't know what mental health was. I didn't know it was a thing that we had to deal with, because I was always taught as someone who was presenting male, as a male of the family in the community that I grew up with, that we shouldn't talk about our mental health, and we should push our emotions down, and that was that. So growing up, I didn't really have any big dealings with it, but I did hear my parents talking quite a lot about men that had committed suicide in the family, and there was a lot of people. But again, I didn't know why. So as I was growing up, I always wanted to further my education a lot, and it was set in like how I should be, that it would be me who would take over from my dad's job and become a mechanic. And it usually happens like the women get pulled out of school and become a housewife and all that stuff. It's very old-fashioned, but I grew up always wanting to do more, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was always super creative as well. So I went to college, I studied psychology alongside literature and sciences, and I was doing like fashion and art on the side as well. But my parents didn't know about that. And I got to the end of college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with anything. And I've always been interested in people. I'm really fascinated about the human mind, how it works and how people think. And it sort of shed some light on what I was going through as well, because I was like, oh my God, we can actually talk about how we feel to other people. Because my experience with mental health growing up, as I said, it was very, very limited. The only time that I spoke to a mental health professional in my whole entire life before college was a counsellor at school, and I just cried for the whole hour. I didn't talk to anyone at all. So my tutor said, why don't you go into mental health? And I mentioned it to my family, and they said, if you're going to do it, you're going to become a psychiatrist. And that was the only thing in their minds that was like commendable to do. But I didn't really want to do that. So I became a nurse. I went to go into university and did mental health nursing at university. And I think that's what really, really opened my mind to what mental health was. And I sort of really discovered myself, because alongside obviously university, I discovered the world of drag, and drag is so diverse, and there were so many people who do it, and not just only in drag, it's just in the whole community. The LGBTQIA plus community is so colourful and so diverse, and it was such an incredible feeling to know that I was a part of that, and I didn't even know what it was when I was growing up. And there's so many avenues of mental health in the community as well. But I finished university, and I've only been qualified since 2015, so I've not been a nurse for that long, compared to a lot of people. But I've worked in so many different settings. When I first finished qualifying, I started working in PQ, so psychiatric intensive care for CAMS. So I was in intensive care for children who were detained under section, and really a crisis point in the mental health, like age 12 to 18. And I did that for 3 years. And the reason I went into that was because I really wanted to help. It sounds so cliche and cheesy when I talk about it, but I really wanted to help children not feel the same as things that I felt when I was growing up. And I got to the end of the 3 years, and it really burnt me out. It's not a career for the faint-hearted. There's been so many different things that happened, and so many people that I met, and it was life-changing. It really did change my life. And then after the 3 years, I went on to work with Huntington's, brain injury. I worked with adults who were diagnosed schizophrenic. I did a lot of community nursing as well. And I've just tried my hand at everything in terms of mental health, because I really wanted to get a full experience of how diverse and vast it can be. It's one thing sitting down at university and learning about it from books, but it's another thing speaking to people who've actually lived those experiences. So it really did open my mind even further. And now, alongside Drag Race, I'm still doing nursing, but in a different sense. I'm working at a vaccination centre at the minute. And to be honest, even at the vaccination centres, I'm going into therapy with some of the people who come in because they haven't spoken to anyone in over a year and a half. And we're told to keep to strict deadlines, so sometimes our appointments are 5-minute slots, but I still get some life questions in there, and people leave feeling better. But yeah, that's my very super quick journey through mental health.
You both actually got me with emotion and everything. Cherry, obviously, I think, and as I am also a drag performer, for those people who don't know what I do, but so often that's the bit of you that people want to see. So it's actually really lovely to feel a little bit more of your experience. But returning to your big life as a drag superstar, can you talk a bit about how drag maybe feeds into the areas around mental health? What do you see that playing a role?
Drag has always been a huge thing for me. Always growing up, every time my parents went out of the house, I would put on a pair of heels and feel better in myself. So when I went into the clubs and I was actually started wearing drag, getting into drag and feeling my fantasy, it was a whole different world to me. And it really opened my eyes, because not only when you're in drag, you are a performer, an artist, but people sort of see you as a therapist as well. Even if you're not qualified in anything, you don't really have to be, but people, if you're in a nightclub, I've been working in nightclubs, and people have came up to me and told me the whole life story, and we've been sat for hours and they don't know who I am. But I think it's because you're in drag, people see you as more approachable and be able to talk about that stuff. And I am so open to that. And I will happily sit down and talk with someone for hours about the mental health. But it's just, I think as someone who's a drag artist, I think because we're so accessible in clubs and everyone looks at us, it's sort of I can talk to that person, they seem cool, and I can feel comfortable around them because they seem comfortable in themselves.
And so yeah, that's the role we play. Like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you're a spectacle, it's like an open door to everyone. I think sometimes people get very caught up on either, obviously you're a stunning visual artist, you're a stunning performer, and that feeds into drag. But I think really at its roots, and I know that Craig will relate to this in the way that he projects himself into the world, drag at its roots is an art of relationship, right? It's an art of connection. It's about how you can use spectacle to create community. And I love that. I want to talk, speaking of community, I'd like to ask Craig what he feels is Well, or just identify some of the biggest issues facing our community at the moment in terms of mental health.
Yeah, and just to say, Cherry, what you said there really resonates, because although I don't do drag, although I have on occasion been known to release my inner Gale Force, which was my alter ego, when I was, I won't say growing up, but when I was a student nurse, I also worked, and this is, I don't know, Cheddar, you might remember the Paradise Factory. So I was...
I felt like a personal attack thing. You might remember, Cheddar. Yes, I am.
So I was the guest list, or I think they often called as the door whore, for years and years and years. So I sort of had drag queens as friends back in the mid-90s, before there was obviously any drag race, before it was really sort of, you know, a familiar thing within our society. And I felt so fortunate to be a friend of, you know, the Patsy Towers at the time, because it really did allow me to look at the world through a different lens, through such beauty, but with such depth as well. And so what you were saying there really resonates. And I think those links that transfer into the mental health world, you know, you really articulated them well. So, but just to go back to your question, Cheddar, I think our community is one where I feel we thrive when we have human interaction, human connection, when we're together. And, you know, and that doesn't mean we all get on all of the time. And actually, you know, it can be quite full of fireworks, and it can be quite a challenge. But I think because of the global pandemic, and lots of people have retreated into their, you know, homes and their place of safety, I think we've really lost that ability to connect on that much deeper level. So I don't mean the superficial connections of chatting to people, you know, in the supermarket, but I mean that what I think is some of the golden threads in our community, what makes us such a strong and powerful, you know, diverse, colourful community. And I'm genuinely worried about how we're going to emerge through all of this. I'm hoping we're going to be like phoenixes that rise from the ashes, and, you know, there's going to be a whole new revolution of our community that will come together, because I think we've seen it at possibly one of its lowest for at least my lifetime. And I want to do more in how we're going to transition back into a, you know, restoring some sort of normality for everybody, because I think that restoration will help our recovery journey. And I call it a recovery journey because I don't think any of us expected what's happened in the last year. And I'm not sure any of us truly understand the impact it's had either. So I think we've got to stand together to rebuild, to make it better for us all. And you know, Boris Johnson stole my "Building Back Better Together" slogan. I'm not having any of it. I said it months and months ago. Ask my dear friend Duncan Craig. I said it in a board meeting in Survivors a long time ago. But I really genuinely think
we've got the minutes.
Yes, we've got the minutes. I really genuinely think we can just sort of, you know, open the village, open the gay bars, open the clubs, and us all go back to it. But if we're really going to understand what's beneath the surface and potentially the impact it's had on people's mental health, I think we've got to up our game a bit on how we're going to make sure we support each other as a community and not be diverse, divisive, or even destructive, because I do feel sometimes that it's very easy to get into that place and it's much harder to invest time in making sure that we're stronger together. So I'm not sure what the answers are, but I do feel that that's, you know, one of the things that we need to think about when we're starting to, you know, transition back into some sort of normality.
Do you feel, and this is like, please feel free to chip in, Cherry, like there's no rules, we can do what we like. The people who are managing it have gone. Do you feel that this situation has amplified existing issues? And if so, which issues?
Yes.
For us? Yeah. Thank you, Cherry.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. I think the pandemic has really made people look into themselves a lot more, whether they wanted to or not, because we've got all this time with ourselves, and life gets really hectic at times, and we just go about and we just feel like we're all right floating above the surface, but we very rarely have had time to just sit back and think, how do I feel? How do I actually think about certain things? And it's been really interesting seeing a lot of big things that have happened, like Black Lives Matter, Asian, like all these things are making people think. Whereas usually there's just things people might have seen online and then gone about the day-to-day business. But now we've got all this time to actually sit down and look into things a little bit more, especially within ourselves as well. I know I have, like, even myself, I used to teach mindfulness all the time. I used to like it with therapy. I did CBT, and I never really took on some of the skills myself. I just thought, oh, like it wouldn't work on me. But it's actually made me become a lot more spiritual, and I do mindfulness every day now. And it works. Do you know what I mean? Like but it's never something that I'd thought about doing beforehand. So I definitely think it's helped a lot of people look into themselves.
So I think there's something in what Craig was saying about connection and stuff that was probably already going on, specifically, like, or predominantly for the LGBT community and for the queer community. In terms of the ways that we connect with one another and how we've been forced to amplify certain things that can be a little bit problematic for us. And I think things like social media, things like, if you're thinking around issues around chemsex and the kinds of connections that are involved in that and the sort of mental health implications of that, and the kind of undercurrent of that within our communities, I feel like there's the pandemic has certainly done nothing to aid those things and probably done a great deal to accentuate them.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's something as well for me about I suppose how we emerge out of it. I'm worried that everybody's going to come out, and when there's more freedom, I think, everyone's going to sort of explode in this, we're free, we can do what we want, and that potentially puts people at risk for a whole range of reasons that I genuinely, the dad in me starts worrying about. Well, is everybody just going to start, going out and going crazy and whether it's drugs or sex or alcohol or whatever. But I think this has really exposed inequalities, both in our community, I think in the BAME community, but also for the first time in my life, I've seen loads of social media about classism and how they're starting to separate us out as classes. Now, I'd never really given a thought to whether I was, my mum and dad are working class, and I was brought up in a working class family, but I think when you become a mental health nurse, all of a sudden you get given this badge of, you're middle class because you're a professional, and if you weren't over a certain amount, you're middle class. I don't view myself like that. I feel very fortunate and very humble and lucky in some respects. But I think that what this has done is shown some real separation of class, equality, diversity, and also in relation to some of the BAME issues that we're presenting. And because we've got, a bit like Cherry said, we've got nothing else to do, it's all splashed in social media. And now everyone becomes judge, jury, executioner. Everyone's an expert on everything because people have got all this time. And I think that's going to be something really that's going to stay with us for some time. It's going to be an echo of what happened in the pandemic.
I think on down lines of queerness, if you like, whilst I believe you have a partner, don't you, Cherry? And I know you exist in a lovely family environment as well, Craig. Like, speaking as like the stereotypical single queer who lives by themselves, the way that restrictions were built around a certain heteronormative model of being in a family, or being in a couple, or a kind of desirable, stable life. I feel that there was a real disproportionate, if you like, an implication for queer people. For many queer people, obviously, we all have a great varied, different kinds of family structures that we live in. But I think certainly there are probably quite a lot of queer people who have been far more isolated and haven't had those, like you say, that place that your queer family plays in your life as a queer person, quite often. you need those connections, you need those environments, because they're where you find your community, they're where you find your well-being.
And for some people, I think the village closing in Manchester, which was that mecca of actually meant that their whole social life, their interaction with people beyond maybe even their work or home life, that's where they, you know, went and had that social contact and that felt that community cohesion and, you know, were able to be themselves, has been closed for months and months and months. So, you know, if you do want to borrow a boyfriend, you can have my fiance free of charge. He's a great cook. He does bake. It will give me a rest.
We'll talk about it on June 21st, okay? We'll talk about it on June 21st. But like I said, that nexus of connection has been ripped apart from us, and I know you will definitely be able to relate to this as well, Cherry, because I know you as a performer during those times, that almost the bottom falling out of your life. And I know, for example, for drag queens, and I speak from experience, we were quite often working half and half in paid employment, PAYE employment, and self-employed employment, and these all things become interconnected in a way that is reflective of the implication for our mental health, because it's about how you're valued and how the things that you find joy and pleasure in your life in are valued, and which ones are not easily discarded, because that's not fair, because obviously these things did happen and they were very important and they were very, very necessary, but certainly there wasn't compensation in terms of catering for those needs. They were seen as less important than other things.
Yeah, without a doubt. I really hit quite a low when the village closed. I'm not going to lie. I'm one of them people who are not very sociable, so I don't really talk to that many people. But when I was at the village, that was my social life. It really was, like going to work, like driving there. I was excited for it. And when it closed, I know a lot of people felt very disjointed and they didn't know what to do. And I think as queer people, we're always told, and we always feel like we have to always adapt. But sometimes, why should we have to adapt? Like, especially all these online shows and things, and especially as a drag performer, I hate doing things like online shows. I can't think of anything worse than standing in front of my bedroom wall and dancing to my computer. But I just don't get the same feeling from it. And I know a lot of people who I've spoken to feel like that. But it's just, yeah, it was definitely a lifeline, the village, and I know we're all raring to get back there.
There were points, weren't there? So there were points when it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, and like I'm filming, doing a number, like literally watching it back, like, and starting to cry because it's the 15th time I've done it. And I've got to do it again, but this time cheery.
And that's not good for our mental health.
How was it being a proud gay dad during this time? Because obviously you had the different dimension of parenting to deal with.
Yes, parenting. So Cameron, my son, well, our son went to school continually, but it wasn't really school. It was for the first part of the lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, it was very much just attending school. So there was still, you felt a compulsion to do education, and we're trying to be really balanced. So, you know, we try and keep active with him, but also let him play on his computer games, Minecraft Dungeons, Fortnite. Oh, good Lord. You don't know what the trauma I put up with to learn about all of this, but still try and do things when actually you're really limited to staying at home. So it was a challenge, but the one thing that I found was a real sort of buzz for us was that he was so resilient and he was so adaptable that it made you feel like, come on, right, he can get on with this, and, you know, think, right, well, we'll do something different today. And therefore, as parents and as adults, taking a bit of a lead from his enthusiasm and his, you know, sort of positivity made me more positive and think about things in a much more I can do this way, because I do genuinely worry if we hadn't have had Cameron, I probably wouldn't have had a partner, because we would have Trevor Jordache him under the bloody patio when I was redoing the garden. But children just have this whole way of looking at things through a lens of, happiness and not necessarily feeling the whole pressure of the NHS and the salons closed and we've had to furlough people and I'm not seeing my mum or my nan as much, and my nan's got dementia, and all those things that just go on in your head as adults. So it's tiring trying to do things every day, especially during lockdown, but I do think it was one of the things that got me through as well. So it was a bit of a double-edged sword, he's so happy and such a pleasure and a joy to be around. It just makes you feel better. I think when somebody else is happy around you, it just makes you a bit of a nicer person, because I can be a dragon on occasion. So I felt that he diluted my dragonness every now and then.
And how about you, Cherry? How have you been coping? You all right, Bab?
I am. That is a loaded question, isn't it?
Well, you've got it. It's important to ask, though. It's really important.
It is. I mean, I'm all right. Yeah, I'm just doing what I can to keep my head above water. I think I'm just trying to stay busy. Do you know what I mean? And not have that time to just sit and think to myself. I've had over a year of it now, and now we're coming to the end. I'm just like, I really want to get back to some busyness. But I'm okay. I'm just keeping busy.
I feel like either is a burden, right? Like, so I feel like busy, like being not busy is a burden, and being busy is a burden, because I feel like as I'm starting to get more things coming in now and starting to get things happening, and like I've taken on some bits and bobs. My brain isn't functioning like it used to. It just isn't. And I think there is something about connectivity. There is something about our callback responses in being face to face with people, and being like, for us, Jerry, being in large rooms of people and literally feeding off them, and that's what drag queens are really doing, right? But there is that real, I feel de-skilled, I feel demotivated, I feel like it just feels very... That
it does.
To borrow another drag race expression.
a lot of people, I do think, will come out of lockdown with heightened anxiety or feelings of anxiety that they've never had before, especially because we've not spoken face to face with that many people like properly in a long time. I mean, if we've been in home, like as I said, I'm working at the vaccination centres, and some of these people haven't spoken to anyone face to face in over a year. And that's not uncommon. So it will affect us all in different ways.
So we've taken it to a low. Let's bring it up again. Do you have any amazing pieces of exciting advice that can maybe, as professionals in your respective fields, that can maybe help people get through this period of transition?
Well, to keep an open mind and don't put pressure on yourself. Because if you try and act a certain way for someone else, it's just going to put pressure on you. And I know it's easier said than done, but try not to stress, because stress, it doesn't help anything. It doesn't speed anything up. It doesn't change anything. It just makes you feel more stressed. So it is a lot easier said than done, and to put it into practice is difficult, but just to keep an open mind. And if you're really struggling with specific things, there are so many charities out there and so many people who are willing to help. Through my mental health career, I didn't realize how much help there is actually out there. When I'm researching things for people, like patients and things, like there's a charity for everything. So just there is someone out there who is always willing to help and to talk to.
I feel like the first part of that, you were almost talking about the art of lovemaking as well, but then we got onto the subject of charities, and maybe it became very much more explicitly about
it can mean whatever you want it to mean, whatever makes you feel happy.
Great.
So there's probably three things for me. So one is, I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, so you've got to do something about you. And I know that can be a bit selfish, but so I try and do something that just makes me happy each day. And it can be something really tiny, like having a cheeky blue ribbon biscuit that I'm not meant to have on my diet, but it puts a smile on my face. Because I think to be able to support everybody else's mental health, you need to make sure that, you've filled your own cup up. In Wigan, we have a hashtag Be Kind. and it's dead easy. So be kind to people, think about what you're saying and what you're doing, just be nice, be a nice human being. And the other one is, I think there's something about us shifting to the virtual way of working that again is going to be us adapting back to normality. Because I used to love putting my coat on and driving home, even though, you know, it was maybe 10 minutes, and having that sort of right, what's, you know, reflection time. I think we've got to be thinking about, you know, being able to close your laptop and put that to bed, so to speak, even though you might still be in the house, and whether you're on your own or with your partner or with your family. So little things like it's very easy to just think, oh, it's there, I'll just go onto the computer. So having some separation between whatever it is, whether you're recording, whether you're working, whether you're Zooming or MS Teams, and having some of your life, I think that's really important.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you both for being part of this discussion, a really, really important discussion, particularly at all times, but I think particularly at this time. So thank you to my amazing guests, the lovely Cherry Valentine and the lovely Craig Harris. I've been Cheddar Gorgeous, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference. Mwah.
Mwah.